The crystalline corridors of Station Meridian refracted light into 1,000 rainbow fragments, each one dancing across the walls like living art. Nadia Volkova pressed her palm against the cool transparency of the viewing port, watching as another transport vessel docked with a massive orbital platform. Somewhere in that ship were more delegates arriving for the Galactic Predator Conference. More species eager to prove their world had bred the most magnificent killers in known space. She adjusted the collar of her navy suit jacket, the fabric suddenly feeling too tight around her throat. 3 years of preparation, 2 doctoral dissertations, and 1 very uncomfortable conversation with the Earth Diplomatic Corps had led to this moment. She was the youngest human ever invited to present at the conference, a fact that filled her with equal parts pride and nauseating anxiety. "Move aside. Soft skin." A gravelly voice rumbled behind her. Nadia turned to find herself face to chest with a Valaxian warrior, his rust-colored hide covered in ritual scarring that marked him as a hunter of some renown. She stepped aside smoothly, offering a polite nod that he didn't return. His contemptuous snort followed her down the corridor. The welcome reception was being held in the station's grand atrium, a space so vast it had its own weather system. Nadia could see wisps of cloud formation near the ceiling, 300 meters above her head. The assembled delegates represented 47 different species, creating a tapestry of scales, fur, chitin, and forms that defied easy categorization. Champagne? A serving drone hovered near her elbow, its tray laden with glasses filled with various liquids suitable for different biochemistries. "Thank you." Nadia selected a glass of actual champagne, grateful that at least something here was familiar. The bubbles tickled her nose as she took a small sip, surveying the room. That was when she saw him. He stood near the center of the atrium, surrounded by a cluster of delegates who appeared to hang on his every word. Tall, even by the standards of his species, with silver-blue scales that caught the light like polished armor. Keltharian, Nadia identified immediately, her xenobiology training kicking in. The proud warrior race from the Keltharus system, known for their fierce combat prowess and even fiercer sense of honor. His scales formed elegant patterns along his neck and jawline, and his eyes, when he turned his head, she could see them clearly, where the color of amber shot through with gold. He wore minimal clothing in the Keltharian style, a dark vest that left his scaled arms bare and pants that looked like they'd been tailored by someone who understood that function mattered more than fashion. "That's Vurin Kolthes," a voice said beside her. Nadia nearly jumped. A Thysian delegate had materialized at her elbow, her translucent form shimmering with what might have been amusement. The Thysians were one of the few species that made humans nervous, since their ability to become nearly invisible made them exceptional ambush predators. "He's the youngest battle scholar in 3 generations," the Thysian continued, her voice like wind chimes in a breeze. "Brilliant, arrogant, and utterly convinced that the Keltharian Voidstalker is the apex predator in the galaxy." "Voidstalker?" Nadia asked, her scientific curiosity overriding her social anxiety. "Massive creature. Hunts in the asteroid fields of their home system. Can survive in hard vacuum, uses electromagnetic pulses to stun prey, and has never been successfully captured alive." The Thysian's form rippled. Vurin has studied them his entire life, written 12 papers on their hunting methodology. He's here to prove they deserve the classification of supreme apex predator. Nadia took another sip of champagne, her eyes still on the Keltharian. As if sensing her attention, Vurin turned his head, and their gazes locked across the crowded atrium. For a moment, the world seemed to narrow to just that connection. His amber eyes widened slightly, and something that might have been curiosity flickered across his reptilian features. Then one of his companions said something, and he turned away, but not before Nadia caught the briefest hint of a smile on his scaled lips. "Careful," the Thysian warned, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Caltharians are hunters too. And he looks like he's just spotted something interesting." Before Nadia could respond, a chime echoed through the atrium, and the crowd began moving toward the conference hall proper. She drained her champagne and followed, trying to ignore the way her heart was beating just a little faster than normal. The conference hall was an amphitheater of stunning design, with seating arranged in ascending rings around a central presentation area. Nadia found her assigned seat in the human delegation section, a section that consisted of exactly one chair, which pretty much summed up humanity's standing in galactic predator discussions. She was acutely aware of the whispers around her. Humans were something of a joke at these conferences. A species from a garden world, with no natural weapons, relatively fragile bodies, and a disturbing tendency toward empathy that other species found baffling. What could they possibly contribute to a discussion about apex predators? The opening ceremony began with traditional displays from various species. The Vorloxian delegate showed footage of their razor maws tearing through armored prey. The Veshan representative displayed holographic recordings of their phase hunters, slipping through solid matter to reach their targets. Each presentation was met with appreciative murmurs and the whole occasional gasp. Then Viren Kolthas took the stage. He moved with the fluid grace of a natural predator, each step measured and precise. When he spoke, his voice carried easily through the hall without amplification, a low rumble that seemed to resonate in Nadia's chest. "The Void Stalker of Keltharus Prime," he began, and holographic images bloomed in the air around him, "represents the pinnacle of predatory evolution. Observe." The holograms showed a creature that defied easy description, roughly the size of an earth elephant, but with a body plan that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. It moved through the vacuum of space with impossible grace, its form outlined by the stars behind it. "This specimen," Viren continued, his amber eyes gleaming with pride, tracked a wounded star whale across 0.7 light years. It maintained pursuit for 6 standard months before making its final strike. That is patience. That is determination. That is the mark of a true apex predator. The hall erupted in appreciative sounds from various species. Even Nadia had to admit it was impressive. The Void Stalker was magnificent, alien, and terrifying in equal measure. Viren's presentation continued for another 20 minutes. Each revelation more stunning than the last. The Void Stalkers hunted in coordinated packs of 3, communicated through quantum-entangled neural clusters, and could detect the thermal signature of prey from distances measured in astronomical units. When he finished, the applause was thunderous. Viren accepted the accolades with a slight bow, his scales rippling with what Nadia recognized as satisfaction. As he descended from the stage, his path took him directly past her seat. He paused, those amber eyes fixing on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "And what does Earth have to offer, I wonder?" he asked, his voice pitched low enough that only she could hear. "Some manner of arboreal ambusher? Perhaps an aquatic hunter with moderately impressive dentition?" The condescension in his tone was clear, but there was something else there too. Challenge. Interest, the same look a predator might give prey that showed unexpected spirit. Nadia met his gaze steadily, calling on every ounce of her diplomatic training. "You might be surprised," she said quietly. Viren's scaled lips curved into something that might have been a smile. "I doubt that very much, soft skin. But please, do try to surprise me when your presentation comes. I could use the entertainment." He moved on before she could respond, leaving Nadia sitting in her chair with her hands clenched into fists and her heart hammering against her ribs. It wasn't fear making her pulse race, though. It was something far more complicated and far more dangerous, because despite his arrogance, despite his casual dismissal of her species, despite every logical reason she should have been offended, Nadia found herself looking forward to their next encounter. There was something in those amber eyes, some spark of genuine curiosity beneath the warrior's pride. That called to something deep in her own predatory nature, the nature that every human carried, whether the galaxy recognized it or not. She smiled to herself, a small, secret expression that would have made Vern Colthus very nervous if he'd been watching. But he wasn't. He'd already dismissed her as irrelevant, as prey that wasn't worth the hunt. That was his first mistake. Human beings, Nadia thought as the next presentation began, had spent 2 million years perfecting the art of being underestimated. And she was about to give Vern Colthus brilliant, arrogant, magnificent Vern a master class in why that was a very dangerous assumption to make. The conference had just begun, and the real hunt was only starting. Vern Colthus had attended 17 galactic predator conferences in his lifetime, and he prided himself on his ability to read other species within moments of meeting them. The Vorlaxians were all bluster and scarring, compensating for insecurity with displays of past violence. The Thysians moved like smoke because they were afraid of being seen. The Bernathi delegates always sat in the back because they'd evolved as scavengers. Not true hunters, but the human Nadia Volkova. According to the conference roster, she confused him. He sat in his private quarters aboard Station Meridian, reviewing holographic notes from the day's presentations. But his mind kept drifting back to those dark eyes that had met his without flinching. Most species showed some reaction when a Keltharian addressed them directly. Fear, aggression, submission. She had shown none of these things. Just that steady gaze and a quiet promise. You might be surprised. Viren's claws tapped against the desk's smooth surface, creating a rhythmic clicking that usually helped him think. It wasn't helping now. Humans were soft. Everyone knew this. Their world was a paradise by galactic standards, abundant water, stable climate, minimal megafauna. They had no natural armor, no venom, no claws worth mentioning. Their teeth were laughably blunt. By every logical metric, they should have been prey animals, not predators. And yet, Vern pulled up the Earth delegation file, something he hadn't bothered to do before the conference. Nadia's image appeared before him, professional, composed, with dark hair pulled back from a face that was not unattractive by human standards. He found himself studying the curve of her jaw, the set of her shoulders, the way her eyes seemed to look directly through the camera. Her credentials were impressive. Xenobiology doctorate from Earth's Cambridge University. Published papers on cross-species predator behavior. 3 years of field research on 7 different worlds. For someone so young, barely 30 standard. Years she'd accomplished more than most species managed in twice that time. A chime at his door interrupted his thoughts. "Enter," he called, minimizing the hologram perhaps a bit too quickly. Thren, his research partner, slithered into the room. The Salvikian's multiple limbs carried data tablets and what appeared to be several containers of nutrient paste. "You missed the evening meal," Thren said, his translator rendering his clicking speech into galactic common. "I brought sustenance. I wasn't hungry." Vern accepted one of the containers anyway. "Out of politeness more than appetite. You're distracted." Thren arranged himself on the room's other seating platform, his eye stalks angling toward Vern with concern. "The human?" Viren's scales rippled with annoyance at himself or Thren. He wasn't entirely sure. "Don't be ridiculous. You spent the entire evening meal session watching her." Thren's voice held amusement. "Very intently, I might add." The Vorlaxian delegation noticed. "There's already a betting pool on whether you'll challenge her to combat or try to court her. That's absurd." Viren's claws scored marks in the desk surface. "I was merely observing. She's an anomaly. Humans don't belong at these conferences." I'm trying to understand why she's here. Perhaps, Thren suggested delicately, you could simply ask her. The station's biodome was one of Viren's favorite places on Meridian. It housed carefully maintained ecosystems from a dozen different worlds, allowing delegates to study predator behavior in semi-natural environments. He came here most mornings before the conference sessions began, appreciating the solitude and the chance to observe without the political posturing that dominated the formal presentations, which is why he was surprised to find Nadia Volkova standing in front of the Keltharian Voidstalker. Exhibit at dawn-cycle. She stood perfectly still, her hands clasped behind her back, watching the young Voidstalker specimen as it prowled the electromagnetic containment field. The creature was only 2 meters long, a juvenile, but still magnificent. Its scales shifted through the visible spectrum as it moved, adapting to the background radiation of its enclosure. Viren approached silently, a habit born of hunter training. He was 3 meters away when she spoke without turning around. They're beautiful, she said quietly. The way they move. It's like watching water flow uphill. He stopped, genuinely startled. How did you know I was there? Now she did turn, and that small smile played at her lips again. You're very quiet, but your scales make a subtle clicking sound when you move. It's rhythmic, like a heartbeat. No one had ever noticed that before. Viren felt something shift in his chest, a sensation he couldn't quite identify. You have good ears, he said, moving to stand beside her. For prey. For a predator, she corrected gently, turning back to the Voidstalker. Tell me about them. Not the presentation version. The real version. Viren found himself responding before his pride could interfere. They're pack hunters, but the pack bonds are chosen, not hereditary. A Voidstalker will spend years, sometimes decades, finding the right partners. They communicate through quantum-entangled neural clusters, which means they can coordinate across vast distances without any signal lag, like thinking the same thought at the same time. Nadia murmured, exactly. Viren watched the juvenile stalk, holographic projection of prey, its movements fluid and precise. But they're also capable of solo hunting. Each individual is a complete predator on its own. The pack simply makes them ... more. Terrifying, Nadia said, but her tone was appreciative rather than fearful. And you've studied them your whole life? Since I was young enough to barely reach the viewing screens. Viren felt his scales warm with the memory. My mentor took me to observe a pack in the wild. We spent 6 months in a shielded observation craft, watching them hunt. It was... He paused, searching for the right word. Transcendent. I understand, Nadia said, and something in her voice made him believe she actually did. I spent 2 years in Earth's Serengeti, studying persistence hunting patterns, watching predator and prey locked in a dance that's lasted millions of years. It changes you. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the Voidstalker. Viren found himself acutely aware of how close she was standing, how the top of her head barely reached his shoulder, how fragile she looked, and yet how utterly calm she remained beside him. Why are you here, Nadia Volkova? He asked finally. Truly? She tilted her head, considering him with those dark, thoughtful eyes. Because Earth has an apex predator that deserves recognition, she said simply. And because I'm tired of my species being dismissed as irrelevant in the galactic ecosystem. Your world is a garden paradise. No megafauna, no obvious threats, she interrupted, her voice still quiet, but carrying an edge now. Which is exactly what makes our apex predator so dangerous. It doesn't announce itself with size or fangs or armor. It simply ... persists. Before Viren could respond, the Voidstalker juvenile suddenly struck, its holographic prey disappearing in a blur of motion. Nadia didn't flinch, but Viren saw her pupils dilate slightly. saw the way her breathing changed, saw the minute shift in her posture that suggested she was calculating trajectories and strike patterns. She was analyzing, hunting in her own way. "Your presentation is tomorrow," Vern said, his voice coming out rougher than he intended. "The afternoon session." "Yes." She finally looked up at him, and he was struck again by the intensity in her gaze. "Will you be there?" "I attend all presentations," he said, which was not exactly an answer. "That's not what I asked." The silence stretched between them, charged with something Vern didn't want to examine too closely. He was a battle scholar, a researcher, a warrior of his people. He did not get flustered by soft-skinned aliens with knowing eyes and subtle smiles. "Yes," he admitted finally. "I'll be there." "Good." Nadia turned back to the Void Stalker exhibit. "I want you to understand." "Understand what?" "What it means to be hunted by something you never saw coming." The rest of the day passed in a blur of presentations and political maneuvering. The Bernafi delegates unveiled footage of their ash stalkers, creatures that hunted in volcanic environments and could survive temperatures that would vaporize most life forms. The Quellian representative demonstrated their shapeshifter's ability to mimic any organic matter down to the genetic level. Vern sat through it all, taking notes with mechanical precision, while his mind remained stubbornly fixed on the human, who had somehow invaded his thoughts. He found himself watching her during the breaks between sessions. She moved through the crowd with quiet confidence, engaging delegates from various species with what appeared to be genuine interest. She asked intelligent questions. She listened more than she spoke. She never once tried to defend her species or justify her presence. And yet Vern noticed she was always watching. Those dark eyes missed nothing. She tracked movement patterns, noted social hierarchies, cataloged behaviors with the methodical patience of a scientist studying specimens. Or a predator studying prey. "You're staring again," Thren observed during the evening meal. "I'm observing," Vern corrected. But he forced himself to look away from where Nadia sat with a group of Physian delegates, apparently discussing crystalline life form hunting strategies. "The betting pool has shifted," Thren continued, clearly enjoying himself. "Current odds favor courting over combat, though there's a subset betting on both. There will be neither." Vern attacked his meal with more force than necessary. "She's here to present about some Earth creature that probably can't even crack chitin. And then she returned to her garden world. And that will be the end of it, if you say so." Thren's eye stalk swiveled in what Vern recognized as skepticism. "Though I should mention that the Volaxian delegate, the one who was rude to her earlier, just approached her table." Viren's head snapped up. Sure enough, the rust-scaled warrior who'd called Nadia soft skin was looming over her table, his body language aggressive. Nadia remained seated, her posture relaxed. But Vern could see the way her fingers had stopped moving, the way her attention had focused entirely on the Vorlaxian. "She's going to insult my species," Thren translated as the Vorlaxian's voice carried across the dining area. "Claims humans have no right to attend a predator conference. Says they should stick to farming and philosophy." Vern was moving before he realized he'd made the decision to stand. He crossed the dining area in 4 strides, his scales rippling with warning colors that made other delegates step hastily aside. The Vorlaxian didn't notice until Vern was directly behind him. "Delegate Croth," Vern said, his voice pitched to carry, "I believe you're disturbing a fellow conference attendee." The Vorlaxian turned, his scarred face twisting into a sneer. "Colthus, I wasn't aware you associated with prey animals." "I associate with scientists and scholars." Vern kept his voice level, but his claws extended slightly, a warning that any Keltharian would recognize. "If you have concerns about delegate credentials, perhaps you should take them to the conference organizers rather than harassing attendees during mealtimes." Several other delegates, had stopped eating to watch the confrontation. The Vorlaxian glanced around, clearly realizing he'd lost the tactical advantage. With a final contemptuous snort in Nadia's direction, he stalked away. Vurin turned to find Nadia watching him with an unreadable expression. "I didn't need rescuing," she said quietly. "I know." And he did know. He'd seen the way she'd positioned herself, the way her hand had moved subtly towards something in her jacket pocket. She'd been ready. But he was being rude, and rudeness offends me. Does it? She stood, bringing herself closer to his eye level, though still looking up. Or were you marking territory? The accusation should have offended him. Instead, Vurin found himself fighting the urge to bare his teeth in what humans would call a smile. "Perhaps both," he admitted. "Interesting." Nadia gathered her datapad and empty meal containers. "Walk with me?" It wasn't really a question, and Vurin found himself following her out of the dining area without consciously deciding to do so. They walked in silence through the crystalline corridors, their footsteps hers soft, his clicking creating an odd harmony. "Why did you really intervene?" Nadia asked finally. Vurin considered lying, considered deflecting. Instead, he found himself answering honestly. "Because you intrigue me. Because nothing about you makes sense according to everything I know about predator species. Because when you promised to surprise me, I realized I actually wanted to be surprised." They'd reached one of the viewing ports that looked out over the swirling colors of the Meridian Nebula. Nadia stopped, her reflection ghostly in the transparent material. "My presentation tomorrow," she said, "is going to challenge everything you think you know about apex predators. About hunting. About what makes something truly dangerous." She turned to face him. "And when it's over, you're going to understand why humans don't need scales or claws or armor." "Bold words," Vurin said, his voice low. "True words." She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the subtle variations in her skin tone, the way her pulse beat in her throat. "The question is, are you brave enough to admit it when I prove you wrong?" Vurin's hearts were beating faster than they should. This close, he could smell her assent unlike anything in his experience, complex and strangely appealing. "And if I don't admit it, then you'll be lying to yourself." Her smile widened. "And something tells me you're too honest for that. Too proud." She was right, cursor. Caltharians valued honesty above almost everything else. It was a point of honor. "You're dangerous," he said, and realized he meant it as a compliment. "Yes," Nadia agreed simply. "I am. Tomorrow, I'll show you why." She walked away then, leaving Vurin standing at the viewing port with his thoughts in chaos and his scales flushed with colors he hadn't displayed since adolescence. Behind him, he heard Thren's clicking laughter. "Not courting her, you said," his friend observed. "This should be entertaining." Vurin didn't respond. He was too busy watching Nadia's retreating form and wondering when exactly he'd gone from hunter to hunted. The betting pool, he suspected, was about to get a lot more complicated.